My name is Henry Smith. I'm a Member of Parliament. I have been since 2010, and I am very honoured to be a Parliamentary Vice President of the British Dyslexia Association.
Wow, and what does that involve?
Well, it sounds a very grand title, and I'm very grateful for it, and I wish I could do more for them to live up to that title, but I try to advocate on behalf of the British Dyslexia Association, and most importantly, people with dyslexia, principally children, here in Parliament, whether that be to the Education Secretary or all other areas of policy that affects people with dyslexia.
Okay, and more specifically, you've recently put your backing behind the Dyslexia Bill. Could you tell us a little bit about what the Dyslexia Bill is, please?
Well, I'm a co-sponsor of the Dyslexia Bill, which is being introduced by Matt Hancock. And what that will do is ensure that children at primary school, all of them are screened to see whether they may have dyslexia, so that support can then be established to help them really deal with dyslexia and new ways of learning, so that they can really make the most opportunities of their intelligence.
Because if you don't mind me outing you on camera, you say you're dyslexic as well.
I am indeed dyslexic,
so
yes.
What was it like at school for a dyslexic boy whenever you were growing up at school?
Well, I'll admit it's the 1970s when I was at school, so a long time ago, and of course attitudes were very different back then.
Yeah.
And I was labelled as lazy, not trying hard. I think my teachers recognised that I was reasonably intelligent verbally, but they thought I just wasn't bothered to sort of get my thoughts and my work down in written form, or be able to read very well. I'm grateful to my late mum, because she wouldn't take no for an answer. She said, I know Henry's smarter than you're saying he is. He's not lazy. And she really persevered and got me an assessment. But it's only because my mum really persevered that I got an assessment. So many people never find out they're dyslexic, or they find out when they're adults even, and have had many wasted years of frustration and, frankly, being misrepresented by the education community.
My own memories of school were torment, to be honest with you. I look back on school days with a sense of horror, and I can even use the word trauma. There was traumatic experiences at school for me that I look back on, and it makes me feel nauseous. Can you say when you had your screening, when you were a child?
I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I think I was about 9 or 10 years old. And you're absolutely right to say that for many children, a misdiagnosis or no diagnosis of dyslexia, more accurately, can be very traumatic, and actually can be a serious dent to young people's confidence, which can carry through for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you had your assessment, how did that change for you? How did that change school?
Well, I think having the assessment and being diagnosed with dyslexia meant that there was an explanation as to why, as I say, I'm reasonably intelligent verbally, able to learn verbally and visually, but when it came to reading and when it came to putting down my thoughts onto paper, I really struggled. And I think it sort of meant that there was an understanding and reason why that was the case, and I was able to have some remedial lessons that allowed me coping mechanisms to deal with the world as it is. And to know that I wasn't lazy. It wasn't that I wasn't trying hard. It's just that my brain works slightly differently from the majority, as dyslexics do, and that there are different approaches to how we use our intelligence.
And do you think this bill will actually allow for education to take these different approaches? I mean, the danger is, of course, that we screen kids for dyslexia and we go, okay, you're dyslexic. And then what do we do after that? So do you think the bill actually allows for more inclusive education?
It's a very important point, and what the bill seeks to do, obviously, is screen children for dyslexia. But there's a second part that's very important, and that is, as you say, ensuring that once somebody has been identified as dyslexic, that they then have the support in terms of the techniques and different ways of learning that they need. So you're absolutely right. Screening is very important to identify the issue, but then the support and the help needs to follow on from that.
Yeah, yeah. And what kind of work does the British Dyslexia Association do in terms of helping kids activate their learning better?
Well, the British Dyslexia Association are, first of all, great advocates on behalf of those of us who are dyslexic, which is fantastic, and they raise enormous awareness of the issue, and they really have, I think, created a cultural shift in terms of attitudes towards dyslexia from when you and I were at school many years ago to now, but there's still a long way to go. So the role that they play is very important, but also the way that they convene, I think, professionals and those of us who are dyslexic to provide methods and supports to dyslexic children in particular, but people of all ages, is a vital role that they play, and I'm delighted to be associated with them. Yeah, yeah. And can I ask one final question? This is perhaps the strangest question of all, but why has there been no dyslexia bill passed before? It seems so obvious. Well, it's a very good question, and it's taken too many years, I think, to try and get this legislation on the statute book. I spoke earlier on about there's been a cultural shift over time, but it's been a very slow cultural shift over the course of the last half century that I've been around. This legislation screening should have been commonplace many years ago, but these things take time. It's been a long campaign, but we really now have an opportunity, I think, to ensure that we have screening in place. And then, as you rightly identify, it's not just the screening and the identification, but then it's important that schools, the Department of Health, other education institutions are there to ensure that the support is available so that dyslexic people can make the most of their intelligence. A majority of dyslexic people are often very intelligent individuals. It's just that they face this barrier to expressing themselves in the conventional way, and therefore it's really important that not only for them, but I think for wider society, that people will have a lot to give to the world, have the tools to be able to do that, and that's why this bill is very important.
And one final thing. You're dyslexic and you've made it into Parliament, and you've been fairly successful in Parliament. I'm dyslexic and I eventually got my doctorate. Could you perhaps give one piece of advice for dyslexic kids out there who have found out they're dyslexic and they realise what a struggle it can be? Is there one thing you can say to them?
I would say have confidence, believe in yourself, know that you have a contribution to make to the world, and be determined to deliver that. Recognise that your brain works slightly different from the majority of people, but actually your brain has a lot to offer, and just keep persevering. Don't take no for an answer.
Thank you very much indeed.